Well, hello, everybody. Looky who I have here with me. It is the great Jimmy Dore. I was trying to think of a nickname. I was just gonna say like Jimmy Dorrington, or like, which is not a nickname. It's just a weird thing, or like Jimmy Dorskis, or Jimmer Dore, which makes no sense.
Jimmy Dore, don't slam him.
Jimmy Dore, don't slam him. So how's it going, man?
Things have been kind of crazy since I came back from Italy. I've been sick, and just no doctor. I went to a doctor who looked just like Keanu Reeves.
So he had to be shitty then, right? And boring.
Yeah, he didn't really have much. I heard him practicing his Spanish with the nurses in the hallway, and I really felt like I was in a Nora Ephron movie, honest to God. But I'm feeling like they got me on steroids, which
anabolic steroids, or the other, like the medical other ones.
I don't know, but my home run power is back. So either way, that's I'll take it.
So do you know what it is or no?
It was for bronchitis, and I have a polyp in my sinuses, which makes my ear hurt. Anyway,
yeah.
It's just but it's just getting older, Kyle. It's too much stress, is what it is.
Oh,
actually.
Dude, you don't have to tell me. I'm 30 years old and I'm on high cholesterol medication.
Are you really?
Yeah.
What do you think, statin?
Not a statin. They're trying something else because they say I'm so young that I shouldn't take a statin. They said all the evidence on statins is for people like over 40 because nobody this young has high cholesterol except for fucking me. So they gave me something else, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the biggest issue, but I've been sick recently too. Like I get up and I got the, whatever, mucusy, but people don't want to hear about our problems like that.
No, I do not want to hear about our problems.
Yes, no way.
One thing I know is people don't like to hear about other people's maladies.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about you and I, where we first of all I don't know whether to blame you or credit you with Gillum yet. We don't know. There hasn't been it's definitely you that is controlling. We are the puppet masters of Florida.
That's right. That's a fact.
But we want to talk about our differences in strategy.
Yes, and how you think the midterms went and all that fun stuff. So we should probably start there. How do you think the midterms went? Would you say they were good, bad, middle-ish, or what?
They were a little less than middle-ish. I think almost. You know what's very disappointing is that I say this over and over. I sound like a broken record, but I come from what they consider the bluest of blue states, right? So everybody in California is a Democrat, supermajority in our legislature, with Jerry Brown, who when I was growing up, they used to think he was a crazy lefty, like a hippie, and he's our governor, and we still can't get Medicare for all in the fifth largest economy in the world. We can't get a ban on fracking. Jerry Brown took millions of dollars from the frackers. We don't have free college. We have a housing crisis. We can't even get rent control passed because the corporate interests hijacked the ballot act. And they even got us to vote against cheaper drugs when Bernie sponsored it out here a year ago. So we're sending, in the bluest of blue states, we're sending back Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi. And if you watched either of their speeches after the midterms, it was a parody of a vapid, empty speech. And Nancy Pelosi calling for bipartisanship and unity. And Dianne Feinstein not even really knowing where she was. I don't think she even knew where she was. She was speaking in she said there's still bad things and lots of problems. And it was hilarious, actually. So Nick Branham makes a point about me. My strategy is I vote for a progressive no matter where they are. If they're in a Democratic Party, Independent, Green, Republican, I would vote for a progressive. He brought up the point that of all the congressional candidates, we've only primaried two corporate Democrats, and that was Joe Crowley with Ocasio-Cortez and Ayanna Pressley. I forget the name of the person. She primaried. And so the idea, it looks to me, and maybe you can convince me otherwise, it looks to me that it's not happening, the takeover of the Democratic Party. And I think it's an unreformable party. I don't know what to do. If we're going to talk about strategy, I don't know what to do. Chris Hedges talks about, action in the streets and that kind of thing. And, look what Bernie got done with outside of electoral politics with Amazon and Disney. That's a big deal. And I think that's the way we have to go going forward is not we can't rely on electoral politics.
Well, with Bernie and Ro Khanna, you're right that they were able to basically force Amazon through using shame and public pressure in order to force them to raise their minimum wage to $15 an hour. I do think it was the actual bill. I think that Bezos was scared that the actual bill might catch on because it did have a bipartisan framing in it, where I think he felt that Republicans might even sign on to it. So that did almost like shame him into making a change for the better. But I think you laid out a lot of important stuff that's correct, honestly, about the problem when you talk about, we got Pelosi, we got Feinstein. You lay out how your state is all Democratic, and then you don't see, the positive change, or at least not the change that you and I both want. But on Nick Brana's point, that's where I definitely have disagreement, because that fact that he throws out there is a little bit misleading, because what he's not doing is he's not taking into account the corporate Democrats who weren't already elected, but who were running. So he likes to say, they only unseated 2 corporate Democrats. What he's not telling you is that in 41% of the candidates who received an endorsement from either PCCC or Our Revolution or Justice Democrats or DSA, they actually won their primaries. So yes. We basically took people who were going to be corporate Democrats and then knocked them out. So I think that that's a very important data point that tells you more of the full picture.
That's certainly an encouraging statistic. But so is it your position? You think it is, the reformation of the Democratic Party is in full swing and it is something that can happen?
I would absolutely say we're in the process of doing it. And I think there's a lot of data to back that up. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that we've had, we get an A+ so far for how far we've come. But what I would say is we've come a very long way. So, for example, as a direct result of these exact groups that we're talking about and grassroots pressure, there were 4 elected officials in Washington, D.C. who openly did not take corporate PAC money. Now there's going to be over 40. So I think that's huge. There used to be, I forget the exact number of what it used to be, but it was something like 20 or 30 Congress people who supported Medicare for All and actually signed on to H.R. 676. Now, as a direct result of what these groups have done and the public pressure, we've gotten to the point where we have, I think it's over 120 people who now support Medicare for All. And now there's even a Medicare for All caucus, which is awesome. And then there's also the fact that, so Nancy Pelosi, of course, she wants to be Speaker of the House again because she's a demon and she cares nothing about narcissism and self-aggrandizement and having more power and serving her donors. But in fact, I just saw this right before we started talking here. There's now a movement where Democrats in the House are blocking it. And they're saying, no, we don't want you to be Speaker. And according to Seth Moulton, Representative Seth Moulton, as of right now, she doesn't have the votes. And that's a direct result of the work that we've done. And so, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez today was, I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, but she was getting shit all over the place on Twitter from, the donut Twitter, the corporate Democratic Twitter, because what she did is there was a sit-in Nancy Pelosi's office because they wanted urgent, immediate action on climate change. So these environmental activists basically took over Nancy Pelosi's office, sat down, and then guess who goes in there to give them encouragement and to also give a speech? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And so, the establishment idiots on Twitter are saying, oh, you're foregoing any chance you have of getting a committee seat when you do something like this. And so, but the fact of the matter is, now, so that's like you or me being an elected representative, and that's what we would do in that situation. We'd go in there and we go, no, I'm actually with these protesters. And how good is that for the future and for getting more people involved in politics and to have people who think like us get into positions of power? Because what she's showing is it's possible. Like, it's possible for people like us to get elected and then have a real impact. So I think there's a lot of data points that show that it actually wasn't overall a bad election. At the beginning, I thought, you know what, this was mixed results, because on the day after the election, it was like the Democrats picked up like 27 seats and they lost the House. So I was like, it was mixed. But then as time went by, more results kept rolling in, and now the Democrats picked up 33 seats. They say there's still 12 races outstanding, so when all is said and done, it's going to be about 40 seats. And then also, that's the biggest pickup since 1974. The last time Democrats picked up this many seats was Watergate. Now, that's not like by definition good, because it matters what these Democrats are going to do, but that's where I think the work of Our Revolution and DSA and the PCCC and Justice Democrats, where that work is so important, because, and we saw this in the election results, as a general rule, the further left the candidate was, the better they did. So, for example, Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Donnelly, Claire McCaskill, these are all rank corporatists and blue dog Democrats, and they were wiped out. They were absolutely crushed. Now, a good counter to that, so Joe Donnelly lost in Indiana, Democratic senator. The state right next door, Ohio, Sherrod Brown won re-election. Sherrod Brown won by 8 points. Joe Donnelly lost by 8 points. They're right next to each other geographically. Why is that? Well, The Intercept had a great article that basically laid out that all the Democrats who took a stand against the Wall Street deregulation bill that a lot of centrist Democrats signed on to, those Democrats won re-election in a crushing fashion, and the Democrats who signed on to the Wall Street deregulation got crushed. So I think that there's, like, for our ideology, for our philosophy, for what we're pushing for, there's a lot of good stuff happening, because like-minded people really are getting more power, and the shitty Democrats are being wiped out. I would say slowly but surely, but it's not even that slowly. And then, of course, the Republicans are getting their ass kicked. So I do see a lot of wins overall.
So, you know, they did take back some governorships. They took back some state houses. I didn't know it was the biggest pickup since Watergate. That's
yep.
Is that because they were so wiped out? Is that because they had so much ground to make up? You know what I mean?
That's certainly a part of it, for sure. But it even beats 2006, which was viewed as like a giant thumping for the Republicans.
Yeah, that was. I remember that. But I think they lost the Senate in 2006 too, so that's why that was important. But you know, I was talking with Thomas Frank today, and he was saying that he's afraid that the Democrats are such, you know, bad rulers or whatever. They're not going to handle let me make him sound not as stupid as I'm making him sound, because but he was saying that he's afraid the Democrats won't even be able to hold on to the House because they'll be so inept at the resistance. Nancy Pelosi's already talking about bipartisanship and unity, and they just won't save Medicare for all. I mean, how corrupt do you have to be transparently? 9 out of 10 people in your own party are for it. The majority of Republicans are, and she won't even still say it. It's an amazing thing to see. And if you watched, well, we already tell you her speech and Dianne Feinstein's speech, just the emptiest, most platitude-ridden things I've ever. They didn't even make sense. Bipartisanship, that is not why people elected you. What again? They're still reaching right instead of if you want unity, unify with the progressives. That's what you should try to reach out to the progressives. Quit reaching out to the right, but that's just what their donors want them to do, and that's just what it's going to happen. There was I forget the guy's name. It wasn't Mark Penn, but there was a ex-Clinton advisor who said that he was being interviewed, was it by The Intercept maybe? He was saying he didn't see a path for anybody to beat Trump. He starts talking about Tom Hanks and The Rock.
Yeah, like Hillary advisor. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I mean, that's still how out of their mind these people are.
Yeah.
Where do you see it in, I mean, all they're going to be able to do is be a check on Trump right now, which is good. That's important. But what they should do is do that stuff they should pass Medicare for all and let the Republicans have to kill it in the Senate. They should do all the stuff that they want to do, right? Or that progressives want them to do. It's not going to pass anyway. Do it. Now you have the moral high ground and you expose them. But they're so inept. You and I both know they're not going to do that.
Yeah. And to see, that's everything you just described there, I totally agree with. But that's why my conclusion is what Justice Democrats at Our Revolution and DSA is doing is so important because, and again, the best example was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from today. The thing she was demanding as she joined the protesters in Nancy Pelosi's office was, you have to pass a Green New Deal to get to 100% renewable technology. So now there's direct activist pressure, and a congresswoman inside the House is now pushing Democratic leadership to do the right thing. And that's why, listen, when we launched Justice Democrats, the whole point was, no, this is a democratic civil war, and we're going to win this democratic civil war. The left is going to win it. So we're forcing them to bend to our will because we're the voters and we're the grassroots activists, and they should bend to our will. So that's why we were able to get up to 120 Democrats now supporting Medicare for all. But it's good to see that we're trying to put an end to exactly what you described, which is the weakness of Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein and the corruption of Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein and, repeatedly bending to the will of Republicans. You're right. I saw that. The headlines all about, oh, she's speaking about bipartisanship. Oh, we have to reach out. We have to compromise. When the reality is, no, you were sent there with a mandate to do the exact opposite because people see exactly what's going on and they say, I don't want that. I don't want to send a preposterous number of troops to the border and act like these poor people trying to come in are doing an invasion. I don't want to see a health care bill get passed when it has a 12% approval rating, which is what Trump Care did have. I don't want to see these giant tax cuts for the rich again. I want somebody to fight that. So I think that your diagnosis of the problem is 100% correct, which is why I think that what we're doing is so important in terms of Justice Democrats and the other groups, because so now we have 7 Justice Democrats going to Washington, D.C. We have 13 people from the progressive groups going to Washington, D.C. Now, when you expand it further than that, honestly, the picture is even better because there's 42 Democratic Socialists of America wins when you go at the national, state, and local level. And for Our Revolution, there are 70 wins when you get to national, state, and local. And then we haven't even brought up the ballot initiatives where you and I both know that the left crushes on ballot initiatives. Over 80% of the ballot initiatives end up going in the left-wing direction because people on the individual policy proposals, they're just overwhelmingly left-wing. So I think there's a lot of positives to take away, but the bottom line is we can't keep fighting. We have to keep fighting. And allow me to say, when it comes to fighting, I'm not ideologically rigid. So I don't say, hey, my way or the highway, fuck off. I think that there is a way to fight back if you're more apolitical and you want to organize from outside of party politics. And let's say you want to join a union and you want to, fight in that realm, by all means. If somebody wants to fight the Green Party route, somebody wants to fight the independent route, somebody wants to do what Nick Brana is doing, I don't begrudge Nick Brana at all. I think the thing that was upsetting to me was that he does seem to be disparaging what we're doing with Justice Democrats and from inside the party, and I'm trying to make a commitment to not begrudge people and go after people who I know agree on the goals, and right. I just wish that he would do the same.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't, so what do you make of, like in Florida, the felons get to vote, that passes, but Gillum doesn't carry that same vote total. Well, how could that be? You have to come up with a theory. My theory was, the stench of the Democratic Party. Well, some people just can't bring themselves to vote for Democrats, or they stink. The stench of the Democratic Party rubs off on you. Like even for instance, in Missouri. So the minimum wage passed in Missouri.
Claire McCaskill got obliterated.
Right, and she voted for the bank deregulation, and she is not a likable character in a sense, right? She's not an attractive candidate. She's not an attractive legislator. She doesn't even know who she is. It's like voting for another Republican anyway. So, and she lost, but the progressive issue won. So there it would be like, well, if she would have just ran on higher minimum wage, she would have won.
You're right,
but she didn't.
You're right. Yeah.
So I think there's believe me, I rooted for all the Justice Democrats, everybody in Our Revolution, everybody in Brandon. I rooted for all of those people. And I could be wrong, maybe you guys take over the party. Maybe Bernie becomes president in 2020, and it happens way faster than I thought it could. I still don't think it can. But, it's just like if what happened in Mexico, where they went from nothing to taking over the country, and the same thing that happened in Greece, they went from a fringe party to being the ruling party. Now, what's happened since then, nobody's happy with. But, so things can happen quickly. So I was hoping that a third party would happen quickly like that with a charismatic leader. The takeover of the Democratic Party, maybe it's happening. I could be wrong about this. I still see a snail's pace. And you're right about the 120 people with the Medicare for all. But also you have to, understand 9 out of 10 Democrats are for Medicare for all. The majority of Republicans are for Medicare for all. So that's just, that seems to be. So how are they going to keep that from us, Kyle? Because they are. How are they going to keep Medicare for all from us when overwhelming? I mean, we're going to have to get in the streets to get it, aren't we?
Yes, of course. That's the point. Is that they're not going to give anything to us, which is why we need to put maximum public pressure on the Democratic Party. The fact that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was joining a protest against Nancy Pelosi at a time when everybody was telling her to shut up and bow your head to Nancy Pelosi and let her dictate what you're going to do. That's a shot across the bow, man. That's her saying, I'm not playing around. I'm here to really represent the people. And so it's that mentality that it's going to take for us to get these programs that we want, these policies that we want implemented. And obviously, the more people that are in Congress who agree with us or are sympathetic to us, the better it is for us. So on the issue of a third party or going the independent route, again, I want to be crystal clear. I in no way begrudge people doing that. When we launched Justice Democrats, we had to decide, hey, what exactly are we going to do? What direction are we going to go in order to try to get the most change we possibly can as quickly as possible? Well, I'm not a patient dude. I wanted it, and I wanted it now. And basically, when we broke it down, we came to the conclusion that the best way to do that is to take over the Democratic Party for a variety of reasons. I mean, first and foremost, when you look at how many seats the Green Party has in Washington, D.C., the answer is none. They have none in the House. They have none in the Senate. They have 0 governors. They have 0 in upper house state seats. They have 2 in lower state house seats. And I looked at that and I went, okay, well, that's probably not the best way to go. And then you look at independents. It's a similar picture for independents. At the federal level, they have a grand total of 3 politicians, Bernie Sanders being one, Angus King being another, and I think there's 1 in the House of Representatives. So I looked at it, and I did the math, and I was like, well, I think we're better trying to take over the Democratic Party. But then the other thing is, when I looked at just how rigged the process was against third parties, I was amazed by it. Because, so the fact of the matter is, there's a giant institutional bias against third parties. It is flat out rigged against third parties in this country. We don't have a parliamentary system, which is already a giant problem. I wish we did have a parliamentary system, but we don't. We don't have proportional representation, even though I wish we had proportional representation. We don't have ranked choice voting, even though I wish we had ranked choice voting. We have a winner-take-all system. We don't even have ballot access. Even with the Green Party, which has been around for a while, they don't even have ballot access in every state. It's like 48 states or something like that. These guys aren't even allowed in the debates many times. So even though I'm sympathetic to your philosophy, Jimmy, because I'm a guy who, I don't want to call myself extreme, but I don't like compromising. I just like to, I like to do it and do it the right way and do it my own way. So this idea of like doing a third party, creating it out of nowhere, and then somehow getting power and getting everything implemented, when I broke it down, I went, that's not going to happen. And that's like, even if it were to work, which I think it's rigged against that, so it wouldn't work, but we're talking at least 3 or 4 decades before we can do it. So basically the idea for me was, I guess I have to bite the bullet and go the route that I'm uncomfortable with, which is taking over the Democratic Party. But again, I think the good news is that when you look at how far we've come so far, there are just so many data points that are in our favor. And the question I asked myself to prove this to myself is, okay, well, if this isn't victory to this point, then what is victory to this point? Because we are seeing the data points are all in favor of the better candidate. So I brought up the example of Joe Donnelly before and Sherrod Brown before, but even look at like Richard Ojeda. and Beto O'Rourke, and even Gillum is a good example of this, they ran further to the left than anybody in their position running for their respective seats ever. And they also got as close as anybody. So Richard Ojeda was a plus 49 Trump district. He ended up losing by 12 points. Massively overperformed. Beto O'Rourke, what did he end up losing by, 3 or 4? Now, I have my issues with O'Rourke, but he was the furthest left person ever running for a Senate seat out of Texas, and he almost toppled Ted Cruz. Andrew Gillum, again, though I had some disagreements with his strategy in the general election, and he pivoted when he shouldn't have pivoted, fact of the matter is he was further left than the past few Democrats running, and they got beaten by more than Gillum did, and it's going to a recount right now. So what I see is a Democratic Party that is bending to our will because we're forcing it to bend to our will, which is why, and by the way, even though my analysis was I don't think the third-party route is going to work, that I still make a point every single time I bring those strategies up to say, hey, if you want to go that strategy, God bless. Even though, I don't think it's going to be successful, the fact of the matter is I agree with so many Green Party candidates. There are Green Party people elected at the municipal level, and I support them. I think they're awesome. I've probably voted for more Green Party people in my life than I have for Democrats. But that's kind of why I want to force the Democratic Party to bend to our philosophy, because I think it has the best chance of working, and I think that we're starting to see those successes now. The only examples that are counter to everything I've said so far is that Joe Manchin is a goddamn magician, and he somehow keeps winning as he spits in the eye of his base. And now the other one is Kyrsten Sinema, who's a corporate Democrat extraordinaire, and she ended up pulling out the victory in Nevada. But outside of those two, everything else I see is just overwhelmingly positive for us and our philosophy.
Who was the person in Arizona who just won?
That's Kyrsten Sinema.
Oh, okay, you said Nevada.
Wait, what did you ask? Arizona?
Arizona.
Oh, Arizona, I'm not sure. Kyrsten Sinema is Nevada, I think. Is she Nevada? Okay, I'll look this up while we're talking.
Okay. Because, yeah, I just got informed today, someone mentioned it to me, that the Arizona Democrat won, and that she said, whoever the Arizona Democrat is, why am I
no, you're right. Arizona. I'm sorry. Arizona.
Yeah. So
I thought Nevada for some reason.
So she said that her judicial or her legislative example that she thinks is a good one is Joe Manchin. She wants to be
she's the worst. She's the worst. I despise her. But she's the one of two counterpoints to everything we've brought up so far. The overwhelming majority of the data is on the side of when you run further left, you do better. The counterexamples are Sinema and Manchin, but that's it. That's all they got.
How about the governor of Michigan already appointing the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield on her transition team?
Terrible.
Absolutely
know. Terrible.
That's why that's why people don't vote.
I agree. 100% that's why they don't vote, which is why it's so important. See, Abdul El Sayed, we were in a primary against her, Whitmer, and Abdul El Sayed ended up just losing, but this is why we got to fight, and we got to be more involved. I mean, Ben Jealous is another example. Seeing that race broke my heart. I read the
Democratic Party abandoned him.
That's the point. And when you're guys, when you're a Justice Democrat, you literally are making a point of saying, I'm not going to be corrupt, and I'm going to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So we're not going to take any corporate PAC money. And in the Ben Jealous example, the person he was running against, Hogan raised about $10 million. Ben Jealous only raised about $350,000 because it is so hard to make up the difference and raise the money when you're not taking big money. So if he were to get more national press attention and he could scream through a megaphone, I'm not corrupt, I'm not taking corporate PAC money, he would have been able to raise a lot of money. But that's the other part to this is there are systemic disadvantages against the candidates that we all like. And it's a direct result of the establishment media doing what they do. It's a direct result of the Democratic establishment doing what they do and trying to stab this political revolution in the back. And we have to try to overcome that. That's the bottom line. We have to try to overcome it. And in many cases, we did. Like with Ocasio-Cortez, she was outraised 10-1, but she ended up winning. But the fact of the matter is that's not indicative of what would usually happen in that situation. Usually the person who raises the most money ends up winning. So what I say is, listen, our message is so popular that if people just keep us competitive we can win. So if it's just a 2-to-1 disadvantage, shit, we can make a 2-to-1 disadvantage work. We could overcome a 2-to-1 disadvantage money gap, but 10-to-1 is just harder to do and almost impossible, and it's super duper rare. So that's what I say to that.
That is the problem, right? The progressives, they don't get the media coverage, and then they can't raise the money. Like, out here in California, Gail McLaughlin, who was the Green Party candidate, who was mayor of Richmond, California, and they took over their whole city council, and she became mayor, and they stood up to Chevron, and she beat them, right? And they spent millions of dollars trying to undermine her and take over their city council and their mayorship, and they couldn't. A real, like, lieutenant governor. She ran for lieutenant governor, and she got nowhere, nothing. And to realize she's not going to get the media, and she didn't have the cash. So how do we have like a, as Lauren Steiner calls it, like an ALEC for progressives? Like, how do we have where do we have like a money flow that we can direct towards progressives? I don't know. It's Bernie doing the whole $27 at a time. Jim Kennedy did the same thing in New Jersey. He didn't win because they screwed him over on the ballot. All that stuff. There's so much cheating going on. Why don't the Democrats give a shit about voter suppression? Why is it left up to Glenn? What's his name? The guy chasing Kobach around. Why am I blanking on his name?
When you said Glenn, all I thought was Greenwald.
The guy I'm talking about, who's a dude, cross-check. He's the guy who's on. He did the greatest democracy.
Greg Palast.
Yeah. So Greg Palast. Why is it left up to him to try to raise money to go sue him? Like, why are the Democratic Party again?
You're breaking up a little bit, Jimmy. You're breaking up a little bit. I hear you buffering.
Oh, it's buffering a little. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
What's the excuse?
You're still buffering. But I actually do have an answer for the specific thing you're bringing up here. In fact, I think I favorited the tweet earlier. I'm going to see if I can find it. The Democrats' first bill is actually in regards, I think they did automatic voter registration as a proposal. But again, that would not be happening if it wasn't for the fact that we've now gotten more lefties into the Democratic Party and now into Congress. Because those people are now going to Washington, D.C., they're proposing stuff like that. I'm seeing if I can find the tweet here. But automatic voter registration is one of the first things that they proposed in a comprehensive bill on this kind of reform. But you're right that you didn't hear them making a case on this for a very long time. And the reason you didn't hear them making a case on this stuff is because the party leadership is people like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. I call him Wall Street Chucky. Hey, by the way, people want me to primary him, which would be very interesting, wouldn't it?
I'd love to see that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Just so I could hear Mike McRae say your name.
Mike McRae, isn't he the guy who does the your impression videos?
Yeah.
That dude is good, man.
Yeah, he's amazing, actually. So for some reason, I'm having a poor internet right now at this moment, even though I pay extra to Spectrum to get I pay like $200 a month for internet, so it's high speed, and I have it hardwired in. But again, it's a monopoly. So Wendy, how long do you think it'll take for the Democrats to have a platform of ending the wars? They never even talk about it. Nancy Pelosi said peace in her midterm speech after the election, but she didn't really say what she meant by peace.
Here's the answer. 2020 is when it's going to happen. And the reason why is Ro Khanna is now becoming one of the strongest voices in the Democratic Party among Congress people, and that is one of his most important issues. He cares a lot about all the issues, but when it comes to Tulsi Gabbard, when it comes to Ro Khanna, you now have people who are in power who are becoming more and more popular and are gaining a voice in the media, and you see more articles about them now, and they're gaining more prominence. And they are now going to set the tone and set the policy direction for the left wing of the Democratic Party, and we're going to force that to be the mainstream. And I think that Bernie Sanders this time around is going to be more aggressive on the foreign policy front. And what we're going to have to do is, I want them to make this argument, Jimmy. I want them to tie in ending the wars with a New Deal. And you can basically say, hey, listen, we spent $7 trillion in Iraq. We spent $2 trillion in Afghanistan. We have 900 military bases around the world right now. It costs $100 billion a year to maintain those bases. We're waging a shadow war in Africa and building bases. None of this has congressional approval. We're, aiding the genocide happening in Yemen carried out by Saudi Arabia. Why are we wasting all that money when Flint, Michigan doesn't even have clean water? Why are we doing that when our infrastructure gets a grade of D+? So what we're going to start seeing, because now Justice Democrats have more influence and are now actually elected. I mean, there's 7 of them there. What we're trying to do, because there is the Progressive Caucus, but you won't be surprised, Jimmy, to hear that the Progressive Caucus is not all that progressive. So what we're trying to do is get an actual Progressive Caucus. That's what the Justice Democrats and the DSA candidates and, the Our Revolution candidates. And what they're going to do is, as a matter of, in order to be in that caucus, you have to not take any corporate PAC money, and you have to be in favor of Medicare for all. And what we're going to do is make foreign policy a much bigger, much more important issue. And I hope that they could tie that into a New Deal as well, because this is the future. The ideas that we talk about on a regular basis, I know it oftentimes feels like we're screaming into a vacuum and nobody's listening, but people are listening, and this is the future. And our ideas that we keep pushing are actually influencing a lot of people, and it's influencing them for the better. So I just think it's super important that we make sure all of these people stay involved in any way that they want to. Again, I don't care how they stay involved. If you want to be outside of electoral politics and you want to join a union and go about it that way, by all means, don't let me stop you. Just because I'm a co-founder of Justice Democrats doesn't mean you have to go the route of Justice Democrats. Maybe you prefer Our Revolution or DSA for whatever reason. Maybe you prefer a People's Party. Maybe you prefer a Green Party. I don't care. However you want to get involved in order to keep pressure on your elected officials to do the right thing, you should do it. You should do it. The last thing we should do is just sit back and kind of let the corporatists continue to run amok and take everything over, because that would be a scenario that we can't even fathom. I mean, the fact that I can't tell you how much hope it gives me, Jimmy, that today Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez joined the protesters in Nancy Pelosi's office and demanded a Green New Deal. I mean, this is because now all of a sudden all the articles are about that. All the articles are about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez demands a Green New Deal in Nancy Pelosi's office. And you know what's going to happen? People are going to read those articles and they're going to go, you know what? I think she's right, and I think that makes sense. And then these ideas are going to keep permeating now more and more. And what's going to happen is, I hate to use this framing, but I have to use it. We're now having our Tea Party moment. The left is now having our Tea Party moment, where the base is saying, hey, fuck off, Wall Street Chucky and Nancy Pelosi, you're done. You're donezo, get out of the way, and we're going to fight from now on. And by the way, Jimmy, another issue which we really need to both push like crazy is Barbara Lee for Speaker. Barbara Lee is one of the only people who was against the authorization for use of military force in Iraq. She was a hero. If you look at her speech when she spoke about that, it is amazing how prescient how prescient she is. She's in favor of Medicare for all. She's right on so many of the issues, and she deserves speakership. Nancy Pelosi deserves to not be anywhere near Congress.
I share your disdain for Nancy Pelosi and your influence. I'm really encouraging. I hope Barbara Lee runs. I'm for her knocking off Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, so that means I'm sexist. That's people have said that about me. Anyway, so I'm there with you, Kyle, and yeah, I'm always surprised that people listen to me and that my words have influence. It's always kind of mind blowing. It's hard, my whole life I've just thought of myself as an anonymous comedian, and now my words have impacted people. So it's kind of an uncomfortable feeling, to be honest. And I'll be right there with you, trying to. I'm pushing for progressives no matter where they are and progressive policies. And hey, I never said I was a genius political strategist. My whole thing is that I think you got to try something different. And I think now we have to do direct action and stuff like that, because direct action is what really gets results. And I'm all for stuff like that.
So final point for me, I don't begrudge anybody, again, I'll say it for the 9,000th time, I don't begrudge anybody who disagrees with me on the strategy. So if they want to go the independent route or the Green Party route or the People's Party route or anything like that, totally fine. All I ask of people is that as they do that, don't try to downplay or actively get in the way of what Justice Democrats is doing, Our Revolution is doing, DSA is doing, because I think it's equally important, and there are a lot of results to show for it. So this is not so coded talk directed at Nick Brana here. So Nick, lay off the Justice Democrats, dude, please.
I didn't know he was actually. When he's on with me, I don't notice him denigrating the Justice Democrats. Maybe he does when he's not on with me, or maybe I just don't notice it. But yeah, I mean, I don't. Have I done that to the Justice Democrats? Have I denigrated?
Well, there are moments where you say there is no progressive takeover of the Democratic Party. I know that what you're trying to say is it's like the Democratic Party is not already where you want them to be. I know that that's what you're trying to say, but I just don't want people to hear that and then think, oh, it was all bullshit and none of it worked and there's no positive things happening. Because honestly, when I sit down and think about it, like, if what we've done so far is not victory, what would victory be? Like, what would the definition of victory be? Would it have had to be we already have a majority of the senators and a majority of the people in the House that are on the populist left and are fighting for our issues? Because Rome wasn't built in a day, and we're going to have to keep fighting in order to get to that point. And what I would tell people is, even if we have a situation where most of the Democrats are Justice Democrats, Our Revolution, DSA-style Democrats, we still have to hold those people accountable. You see what I mean?
Yes, I do see what you mean. One other point I'd like to make about third parties is that, imagine how great it would have been to see Jill Stein on a debate stage with Trump and Hillary Clinton. So you don't have to necessarily be in a position of winning elections to make an impact. And that's why they keep her out of those debates, right? It would have been great. Part of the reason why I voted for the Green Party was I wanted to see them get that 5% so they could get the federal matching money. And, what happened last time, and I think this is something I'd like to hear your opinion on. Hillary Clinton, instead of reaching out to the progressives after the primary, she flipped the progressive off and went to the right. And she reached out. Again, their strategy of screwing over blue-collar workers and trying to get white suburban Republicans to vote for them. So how do we stop that from happening? And I think that if you had a third party that was polling, at 7, 8, 9%, so now you can't win without them, that gave them some leverage. I mean, I'm just trying to think of something to give us leverage so that doesn't happen again.
Well, like I said, I think the answer is to support any and all methods in order to try to defeat the corporatists, the corporate Democrats, and the Republicans. And again, if you disagree with me on that strategy, that's totally fine. But my personal reading of the situation after I broke it down and looked at all the evidence and looked at what has worked in the past and what possibly could work in the future, I just saw a giant institutional bias against those third-party people. So I said the best way is, if we run the Democrats that would run the exact kind of campaign that you would advocate for, because I love your ideas. When you talk about Medicare for all, you talk about free college, you talk about a living wage, you talk about ending the drug war, you talk about a New Deal. These are all things that were in the Justice Democrats platform. To become a Justice Democrat, they had to sign on to all of those ideas. So we know these are vetted people who are for all the right things, and then it's a matter, they have to then go make the argument and go campaign the proper way. And as I said in the case of Gillum, and as I will continue to say from here on out, that general election pivot has to die. Because other people call it pivoting, I call it lying. You said you were for one thing in the primary, now you're saying you're for something else in the general election. This is a strategy that was birthed by the triangulation Democrats, the New Deal Democrats. This is the 1992 Bill Clinton strategy. But I have a message for all these Democrats, and I know you do too, and the message is, it ain't 1992 anymore, okay? The year is now 2018, and we're at a point where we need a new FDR. Not a Bill Clinton, not a Barack Obama. And when I say FDR, I don't mean on the social issues where he was terrible with Japanese internment and all that stuff. I mean a New Deal-style Democrat. I mean somebody who goes in there and keeps their promises. And what I would say, Jimmy, is when it gets to the general election, I'm in favor of them keeping the exact same message they had in the primary if it's a strong populist left message. But I also say, if anything, you want to pivot further left. Do that, and then you'll have a better chance of winning. And again, this is why I think we've seen a lot of success from Justice Democrats and Our Revolution and DSA, is that, Jimmy, even with that giant monetary disadvantage that we had, we're still talking about absolutely out of this world gains. I mean, who would have thought Justice Democrats didn't even exist during the 2016 election? Now all of a sudden, none of these organizations did except DSA, I think, to be fair. But right. 7 Justice Democrats headed to D.C., 13 people who were endorsed by one of the progressive organizations, 42 DSA wins in total, including state and local, and over 70 Our Revolution wins. I mean, if this isn't the beginning of this giant political revolution that we've been talking about, I don't know what is, man.
So how do we coalesce the left, like Nick Brown has his big idea to do?
I don't think you have to. I think that what we need is everybody to understand when we see a good thing. So in other words, like I supported Tim Canova, for example. You know, Tim Canova wasn't a Justice Democrat. Tim Canova was running as an independent. But I didn't care because he was the right person that we should have backed and that we should have been in favor of. So it's just a matter of taking yes for an answer. So when somebody comes along and they're running as a Democrat, but they're right on everything, we should all fight for that person. I mean, it's that simple. And the same goes for Republican. Who was the person who ran as a Republican who's a progressive? I forget who it was.
Oh, it was that Sam... now I'm blanking on his name, but he ran for the chair of the Democratic Party.
Right, and then he ran as a Republican. I would have supported him as a Republican. Again, we have to be more married to the policy ideas than anything else. So as long as somebody's saying yes to us, we should accept it. And we should just continue to, even after we get these people who are supposed to be on our side elected, you still hold them accountable. I mean, the idea that now we could just look the other way because, for example, Ocasio-Cortez is in there. No, now even her, we have to make sure that she keeps doing the things that she promised us. And that's the thing, is that democracy is messy and it's gross and it's annoying. But if we keep fighting, we win. And again, I think a great example of this is, I touched on it slightly before, but everybody loved to mock the Tea Party. And obviously I could not disagree. And I know you could not disagree more with the Tea Party on what they were actually proposing and what their policy ideas were. But what they did worked. They actually got elected everywhere. Donald Trump became president in large part because of that Tea Party coalition that was created in the backlash to Barack Obama. So now it's time for us to do that. And we have to, as long as we're getting together on improving people's lives, then I think that we're going to continue to move forward and continue to win and continue to exert influence on the party. Again, I can't tell you how excited I am and happy I am about the fact that there were 4 people not taking corporate PAC money. Now there's over 40. There were however many who supported Medicare for All, 20, 30. Now it's over 120. I mean, these are huge, huge things. And what they don't understand yet, but what they will get in time, is that not only is this the right thing to do policy-wise, it's also the right thing to do when it comes to politics. See, that's the thing, like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they're bad on the policy. They're also terrible on the politics because they think their mealy-mouthed centrism is exactly what the country wants when we've been screaming hell no at that from 2008 and onward.
Don't try to resist the resistance, Kyle. Don't try to resist the resistance. Talk about Stormy Daniels. What's that about? Let's get to the bottom of this. She's a porno person. Anyway, well, yeah, I mean, I feel, of course, again, we agree on all the policies, and we just, I'm for the Democratic takeover, by the way. I'm for the Justice Democrats taking over, and I'm for it. And, when you do look at that number, that is a pretty stark number, though. The only 2 corporate Democrats were successfully primaried, right?
But we won 41% of our primary races, which means that what that doesn't take into account is the corporate Democrats who weren't in office but would have been if it wasn't for us knocking them off.
Okay, all right. I mean, fair points. I guess we'll just time will tell. And hopefully they can get rid of Nancy Pelosi. I mean, the next big goal would be to get rid of Nancy Pelosi, right?
I agree, yes. And we're going to have to, on all of these different issues, we're going to have to keep fighting. So on the Nancy Pelosi issue, this is a great example where all of us right now should be getting involved in this. I want people listening right now, why not call your representative and tell them, don't support Nancy Pelosi or I won't support you? Why not put pressure on them? Why not say that? Why not say, I want Barbara Lee for speaker, and that's why I'm calling. That's why I'm getting involved. This is really important. I'm your constituent. Listen to me. I was circulating a petition the other day. Humanist Report created it. It's to say Barbara Lee for speaker. I did a segment on it, and I promoted it. And see, this is what we have to... We all need to get together on issues-based stuff, and this is one that's super important because it'll make a big difference if Barbara Lee is the speaker, if Nancy Pelosi is the speaker. That's a huge difference.
That'll make it, maybe she'll talk about reining in the Pentagon budget.
Yes. Well, that's why, Ro Khanna needs, again, his profile's growing, but God has to grow more. Tulsi Gabbard, same thing, so that these become the leaders where all of the articles, like now when we see all the articles on Democratic leadership, it's on Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, But what a great world it would be if you hear quotes from Barbara Lee or Ro Khanna or Tulsi Gabbard or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or any of these wonderful Justice Democrats or our revolution-backed candidates. It's not... I would love it if we already had everything that we push for on a daily basis right there, but that's not the world we live in, and it's going to be a dogfight every step of the way. And we're fighting a two-front battle, which is a battle against the corporate Democrats and a battle against the Republicans. And so as a direct result of that, everybody who actually agrees on the goals should not step on each other's work. That's what I'd say. And
I'm with you. And if I do that, let me know.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Kyle. It's been great talking with you.
It was a pleasure, and right on time, you're buffering again. Right on time, you started buffering again.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm not as smart as you guys, so I just do my best to keep up. My brain was soaked with alcohol for 30 years in nightclubs, and now I'm trying to ease it off with pot. So, but anyway, I think it's been a good conversation, and that is such a good news to hear about Ocasio, because I was afraid she might fall into that trap of being inside the Democratic Party. Now she has to prop up the stuff she's actually supposed to be the antidote to, like Andrew Cuomo. So it's good to see her taking on Nancy Pelosi. That's pretty big deal.
I agree with that. But even on top of that, though, I would also say there are going to be times where I'm sure that she lets us down in one way or another. And when that happens, we just have to try to hold them accountable. Never give up. Always get involved and keep fighting more. The answer is always to be more engaged, not less engaged. Right.
Agreed. Okay, buddy. Great talking with you.
All right, Jimmy. Nice talking to you too, man. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, Kyle.
You too.